This is visible,
Yes,
right?
yes. Yes, yes, ma'am. Yes.
Okay. I'll just put it on slide mode and see if
Yes. Yes.
you
I
can see that.
Yes, yes, yes.
Ramla ma'am, am I audible?
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely clear.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So, but the full screen is visible, correct, ma'am?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Full screen is visible. Yeah.
Okay, great, great. Also, ma'am, just one thing. I was checking my video. I don't know why, but somehow it's not working. Prob
Just check it. Ma'am, I'll tell you how to. I mean, you know how to do the video. Just on that.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, ma'am. That is there. But
Huh.
probably there's something wrong with my device's camera. Like, it's currently my video is on, but I can't see anything. It shows like a camera sign and then a cross over it. I don't know what that implies.
That means the camera is not working.
Yeah, that's right. So I'll have to look into that a little later. So is it okay for the time being if I keep the video
Uh,
off only?
yeah, fine. No problem. Yeah,
Okay. I'll
problem.
just try still in the next 1 or 2 minutes. If I can resolve something, I'll just do
Yeah,
some
sure.
troubleshooting and see. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Ma'am, no problem. You can do it. Or then, copy it in make a folder and copy it. Maybe that will be more easy and accessible. Because
Copy what
sometimes,
exactly?
means like, sometimes the video doesn't work. So what I do is when I make a folder and in that folder I keep that video. So it becomes easy to locate and then it catches up.
No, I'm talking about my camera not working. I don't need
Okay,
a,
okay.
yeah,
Camera is not working. Fine.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, sure. Okay, fine. Got it. Okay. So should we start, ma'am?
Sure. Yeah.
So good afternoon, everyone. Moving ahead with the web series, Sanjeevyati. Today we have Dr. Ishita Ghoshal with us, who is going to speak on a very contemporary issue, and that is about the economic policy and the effect it has. I mean, what COVID affects post-COVID and pre-COVID, and how is the economy adjusted to it, or what are the threats of this particular thing. So before I introduce her and we ask her to start, I would like our HOD madam, Professor Dr. Supriya Patil, to please speak few sentences over it, and then we just proceed with the lecture.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, ma'am.
Class, today we are about to listen to a very, very interesting topic. A topic that is relevant to all of us and something that is important because the RBI, our Reserve Bank of India, has just recently announced its monetary policy. Last 2 years, we all have been, or I would say 1.5 years, we all have been suffering through or, getting used to, adapting to what we call as the COVID pandemic. Is the COVID pandemic here to stay? We don't know. It's lasted for almost 1.5 years. How long is it going to be? We don't know. We don't have answers to all these questions. But has it had an impact on commerce, on economy, on our lives? On our lives, definitely. And it is a yes to everything. It has had a huge impact on all of us. How do we get out of it? There we have to take different measures, different steps. Our governments of the world are taking different measures to come out of this crisis and help our economy. Therefore, with respect to that, Our government has also announced, RBI has announced our new monetary policy. And I'm very happy that we are going to have an expert like Dr. Ishita Ghoshal to come and explain to us what this is all about in simple terms. I won't be between you and the speaker anymore. I'm going to stop now. Enjoy the speech and ask as many questions as you can, because this learning, what you get from an expert, is something we cannot get even if we read hundreds of books and newspapers and blogs and everything. Thank you. Shamla ma'am, back to you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. Aptly said. As according to the CRISIL, the GDP of India will only be approximately 2% higher than March 2020 level. And there was a very nice, interesting article in the Indian Express about, is our Indian economy going to repeat the same thing as it was in 2020? A lot of questions in hand. So let me welcome Dr. Ishita Ghoshal. She is a PhD in economics from Gokhale Institute of Politics and Economics. She has done her MA again from Gokhale Institute of Politics and Economics. She is a BSc Honours from Lady Brabourne College, Kolkata, University of Calcutta. She is presently working as an assistant professor of econometrics, mathematical economics in the Department of Economics, Fergusson College, which is an autonomous institution and one of the most prestigious one in Pune. She is has a wide teaching experience, and her other assignments of teaching include data analytics with R at a certificate course offered by Meghananda Desai Academy of Economics. She has taught econometrics and research methods to BA economics students. She has taught it in the Gokhale Institute. She is a teaching faculty to many institutions, and her specializations or area of interest is econometrics, macroeconomics, and international economics. She has a lot of papers to her credit, and she has attended conferences, and she has also attended some training programs. She has also done a research along with the publications. I think she's done, ma'am, you've done one of your research, and that research was a major research project. She has done it. So that is a primary investigation for project under Center for Excellence, Fergusson College. She has done it under modeling gender wage gap in manufacturing and service sector in Pune, a behavioral approach. So without wasting more time, I welcome her and I ask her to deliver her lecture. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the warm welcome. I'm grateful to the department, HOD ma'am and Shamla ma'am for coordinating, for making this happen. I'm really sorry that my camera isn't working. I always feel, at least, in the online setup, at least if you could see my face and my expressions, then it kind of percolates a little more. But nonetheless, we are going to make do with what we have and see how we can proceed. So I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully you will be able to see it in a yeah, I have shared my screen. Ma'am, I hope it's visible.
Yes, it is visible.
Oh,
and it is in presentation mode. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great. So, it was said in the introduction, and when SOD ma'am also spoke about it, that we are going to talk about the economic policies that have
Ma'am, your voice is breaking.
Okay, I'll just adjust. Is this better?
Yeah, better.
Okay. So, right. So I was saying that we can currently talk about what are the intentions of those policies, like what is the scenario that the economy faced, because of which the policymakers felt that something like this should be brought in and should be helpful for the economy at large. It's still too early for us to comment on the success of those policies, and there are alternate ways of looking at things, right? So how a particular policy is going to work out and kind of manifest itself in the economy, that is only time will tell, right? So for a few things, of course, we have been able to see how things have moved forward, and I will comment on that. But for the rest of the things, we will have to, for the time being, just understand why at all these kind of policies were thought out and implemented, and what is expected out of it. So this first slide that you see right now, I just thought of putting it down together. Even you, I'm sure you may have gone through all of these already. But what I have noted down here are, the few things that these two basic policies try to keep under control, manage, and utilize for maintaining some balance and semblance in the economy, right? So the fiscal and the monetary policy, these are the two instruments, you can say, that are in action for anything that is going on within the economy. So then under the fiscal policy, like they are responsible, of course, for the public expenditure, to take care of public goods. Wherever there is market failure, that is where a fiscal policy is expected to kind of poke its nose and see how things can work out and get a. So in all of this, particularly what I need you to understand moving ahead is, see, we all make decisions in our everyday life, right? Even before going to bed, I mean, before we wake up also, it's like we have to decide what time do we set the alarm at, depending on, whether we have a lecture at a particular time. So when do I need to wake up? When do I need to make my breakfast and so on? So all sorts of decision making that happens in our day-to-day life as well at the personal level, right? We relate to that quite easily. But when it comes to a national policy, at a macro level, that is where the logic of decision making changes a lot, right? So that's what very acutely differentiates the kind of necessities that are triggered by national good and greater good, which needs to be taken care of by these policies by and large, right? And the monetary policy specifically would be looking at keeping the inflation under control through a lot of interest rate, the different rates of interest that we have in the economy, um, keeping a check on the exchange rate and the foreign exchange reserves, right? And as we move ahead, of course, from time to time, I will, come back to these points, and probably in order to facilitate the discussion towards how or why these policies were in place. Okay. Um, but one thing that we need to very clearly remember is this: that the purpose of a fiscal policy, right, uh, is to do something where the private players fail, right? So in so many theories and models that we study, we realize how a competitive market is something that is more welcome, right? And of course, it has its pros, but it does have, it comes with its cons as well, such that if you are not productive, if you're not efficient, you will be thrown out of the market. But in the kind of democratic sovereign setup that we live in, that is not an option, right? You cannot simply sit back and see people suffer and die and be in hunger and poverty. So that is where the fiscal policy comes in. That's the responsibility of the fiscal policy, to help those people who can't help themselves in a way. And the monetary policy is going to be an enabler in many ways for the fiscal policy to be effective. And alongside that, keeping the value of the domestic currency under control is something that becomes very crucial. So keeping these in mind, let's see first how the advent of the COVID-19 and the pandemic and the lockdowns that it brought along, what kind of market failure it led to. Something that was not possible for private players to handle on their own or find a solution for. So I've listed here a few things which immediately happened and also happened over time. So of course, loss of jobs and loss of income was one of the most, the quickest things that was hit by COVID, right? Because since last year March, when we went into a lockdown mode, most of the those daily wage earners, right, they were simply left out of jobs because of the kind of jobs that they were engaged in had to be stopped, right? So because of that, they lost their jobs, they lost their income, and they were literally stranded, right? And we saw there was a plight of these kind of this part of the population in so many parts of the country. Now, the moment this happens, like people are losing jobs, and by way of which they are losing income, what happens is there's a dip in demand that is generated in the economy, right? So if I don't have any money to spend, that means the sellers in the economy wouldn't be able to find people to sell their stuff to, right? And it's a cyclical process. Someone sells, someone buys, and that exchange of money is what keeps the economy running and going. So that kind of took a hit. Then, of course, there were the investor mindset was hacked to a great extent, right? People were skeptical of investing, and that also took a hit. So, from the producer's point of view, you could see that profits and revenues were quite strongly hit, and they just didn't know how to manage it, right? So the only way that this could be tackled in the shortest period of time was to lay off people, right? And that again generated a lot of unemployment. At the same time, there were across the country, you must have heard a lot of news about how, let's say, different companies were reducing the salary, if not throwing people out of the jobs. Of course, we can see innumerable examples of where bonuses were not given and increments were not received and so on. So then a large chunk of the economy were either left out of jobs, they were thrown out of the jobs, or they were continuing with their jobs but with a lower pay, right? Now, because the demand was lower, people did not have enough money in hand to buy stuff. And also along with this, during these lockdowns, people were more or less stranded in their homes. So then it was only the bare essentials and the bare minimum that they were consuming. So the moment something like that happens, then the other side of the economy, the supply side, the producers, they react by restricting production, right? So you can see how all of this it kind of works in a vicious cycle kind of manner, where everything is leading to the other and they are eventually pulling each other down, right? So the lack of jobs, loss of income, which leads to a lowering in the demand that is getting created, which affects the profit and the revenue. Now, the moment that happens, people, the producer side would want to keep their cost at the minimum level and maybe again think of looking at the resources and maybe throwing out a few more people from the job and utilizing with a lesser number of inputs, or maybe reducing the pay that is going out to the current employees. So all of this kind of added on to the kind of inequality and poverty that the country was already facing, right? So we have been struggling with these two things very strongly since the longest of the time, right? The number of the percentage of the population that is still below the poverty line in our country is aghast, and more importantly, probably the inequality of income that we get to see, right? So we do see like, millionaires and billionaires coming from our country, but those are far and few. And so if you look at, for example, the per capita income of our country, probably in that number we are not doing that poorly in the world standards, but if you see the distribution of that income, that is where the problem is, right? So this distribution got even more haywire with this, and that became one of the biggest challenges in front of all sorts of policymakers, right? So different people belonging to different professions were hit differently, right? I mean, everyone had to get used to, let's say, a remote way of working and learning, and delivering, right? So then these were a few things that were to be the main focus of bringing the economy out of the trouble that it had gone into, right? So the main point is that we had to generate demand, and this demand had to be generated not only domestically but also internationally, right? So whatever our domestic producers would produce and sell to the rest of the world as well, that also had to be kept in mind, that uh, if the domestic demand is not that great, then at least if we could tap the international demand and keep on selling more of our products and services to the rest of the world, then out of that money that will be earned, maybe more hiring will happen, more employment will get generated, and so on, right? The most crucial thing that we needed was to put liquid money in hand of people. Okay, and the word liquid here refers to something that is easily accessible and transferable. Okay, so money in general, we look at it from an illiquid format and a liquid format. So illiquid format would be all sorts of investments that you have, like those time bound investments that we have, where that amount of money is blocked and you cannot readily use it, right? So here we are talking about liquid money being put in the hands of people so that they can spend it, because that spending will generate the demand, which will then pull the economy up. We also needed a very smooth transmission mechanism. So whatever policies are put in place, okay, mostly transmission mechanism is dealt, we talk about it from a monetary policy point of view, but it has equal importance in the fiscal policy arena as well, that the policy makers introduced something with a particular intention. Now that has to get transmitted across various groups of people, various bureaucracy, and so on, and ultimately reach the intended group of people and have that intended impact, right? So that's the transmission mechanism that I'm talking about. Next is we needed to re-engage the daily wage earners, right? These were the people who kind of did not have any assets to fall back on, right? So they would go hungry and they would die literally because of losing their job. So we had to find a way to bring them back into this cycle, okay? Enable remote working and electronic transactions. So these two kind of, in a way, go hand in hand, where you can basically move to a virtual platform and still continue with the deliverables, right? So that you don't lose out on earning, and that way the cycle of demand would also remain the same, right? So now, see, we will talk about the policy, the fiscal policy, and also the monetary policy. But I'm going to start with the fiscal policy, simply because alphabetically it comes ahead and no other particular reason. So this part, I'm going to skip a little. I mean, I'm going to go over it quickly because this is comparatively older, but there's a lot that we need to learn from it as well. Okay, so this here is the stimulus package that was declared around May 2020, right? And this had come in 5 different parts, which was targeting 5 different areas of the economy that you can see. I have kind of noted down just the highlights here. Okay. Now, at that time, if you remember, it was mid mid or end of March that we had gone into the lockdown. And there was so much speculation that people simply did not know, what is happening, how long this kind of situation will prevail. It was a complete mess in everyone's head, right? So during that time, this set of policies which were introduced, the stimulus package, celebrated stimulus package of that time, the main intention was to help these people who have been troubled because of the lockdown and the lack of physical work. So how can they be helped? Okay. So if you see the first point here, which is the MSMEs, right? They were the main target, right? Because they are the ones who do not have a lot of capital to fall back on, and it would be difficult for them to maintain and continue with the production process unless some help was being provided by the government. Now, these were like just again the highlights of what kind of things were promised during that time to the MSMEs. Okay, so mainly the idea was that a lot of opportunities were made available for these MSMEs to borrow money. All right, so things like, okay, the collateral will not be required, and then you have a softer loan, and the repayment duration was increased, and so on, right? And the corpus funds that came up. So, with all of this, what the stimulus package promised was that please come and borrow money, please come and take loans, and we are making that easier for you. Okay, and along with that, the last point that you see on this slide, that the e-market linkages were also promised, right? Because not necessarily majority of these kind of organizations were aware also and comfortable with interacting with prospective sellers in a market which was no longer physical, right? To help them, these kind of things were brought in. One of the things that was very strongly appreciated during this time was that the redefinition of the MSMEs. Okay, now this is of course appreciated in the sense because it did get done, but again rebuked in many ways because it should have happened long time back. And some critics were of the opinion that, okay, you needed such a big hit on the economy to realize that this kind of redefining of an entire set of organizations was required. So mostly the valuation of the firms, it's based on that you get defined as either a micro industry and so on. So now what had happened over the years was that in monetary terms, those values had remained the same, right? But over time, as you can imagine, money is losing value every day, right? What 100 rupee used to buy me a year back, it won't be able to buy me the same amount, quantity of products and services today, because that 100 rupee has lost its value over time, right? That's what inflation is. So now you will be able to buy lesser number of products and services with that same 100 rupee. So then in that sense, keeping that in mind, it was crucial that we kind of adjust the definition of the valuation of companies to define them as a micro industry or so on. So that finally happened, and that was a very welcome move. Then these kind of liquidity relief was supported, came along, where all the EPF payments that the different organizations would do, the government had decided to take care of it till August. And in fact, in the latest policies that were declared there, again, it has been, declared by the government to take care of a chunk of it, even for the coming year as well, right? So in this, what happened was The organizations also now would have more liquid money in hand, and so would the employees. So the main point of pushing people towards uh, spending, and that in turn would give an incentive to the producers of the economy to produce and sell, right? So that cycle needs to be restored. This is all directed towards that, right? Now, the trouble here was this. Let's see, the first point that I have mentioned here, that the industrial output had decreased, like in a staggering way, right? So simply borrowing and starting production, if you look at it, if you put yourself in the shoes of the producers, you would say, okay, the stimulus package has definitely given me incentive to borrow more money and put it into production. But what after that, right? I may produce that, but then whom do I sell it to? Right, so that kind of skepticism was something that was being anticipated, that probably the industries won't be able to make use of this, and we still have a long way to go to see where the exact final data is. But then the tentative data that is there now, I mean, it's been a year almost, right? There also we have actually not seen a lot of uh, loans being taken up, a lot of borrowing being done, because of the skepticism that people had in their mind. Also, one thing that was troubling was that through the EPF and all of these supports that the government was extending, of course these were helping people who were already who still had a job, right? So people who were earning something, uh, these policies were kind of making it a little easier for them, right? Um, but the counter argument was this, that probably people who are still earning a salary are not the worst hit people of the economy, right? Um, Similarly, the tax relaxations that were income tax relaxations that were provided, there were deferments that were allowed. There was of course no change in the tax slab or the tax rates, right? But it was just said that maybe instead of filing your taxes in this quarter, you can do it in the next quarter. So that was kind of a displacement of the tax, but not a complete support in that sense. um, then came like the budget that was declared for the year 21-22, right? And this is where as particularly as students of economics, every year we kind of look forward to this happening, because that kind of paves the way for the kind of policy making that we are expecting to see in the near future, right? Now, what you see on the slide right now in front of you were essentially the main focus points of the budget, right? So you can see how health and well-being was at the top of that list, clearly because we were so brutally fighting against COVID, be it with the quantity of oxygen that we had, the beds that we had, the kind of medical professionals that we had, and infrastructure as well, right? So that was the main, you can say, focus, along with, of course, the rest of the things. And then what you see as the last point again is something that is very crucial, that you minimize the government and maximize governance, right? So the act of governing has to be, was something that was very consciously decided to be given importance, rather than the establishments, okay? And see, this is something that we have seen coming in the way of policy making and implementation of policies for years. So it was a very, very welcoming kind of action and look towards the future, I would say. Right? So here I will just highlight a few things that the budget talked about, which we thought would pave the way for the upcoming policies. So we needed to be able to attract foreign investment into different sectors. right? And what you see on the screen here were a few of the things which the budget uh, envisaged to highlight and take care of in the coming year. Okay, so if you see here how the capital expenditure was fixed, okay, the Atmanirbhar Swasth Bharat Yojana, right? So this is something which so far has actually been, you can see the money being utilized. Of course, these are not things where we can see the changes overnight. Building infrastructure, particularly medical infrastructure, takes years, and building resources like human capital resources, again, we all know how long that takes. But still, we have come a long way from where we had started off at the beginning of the last year, I would say. Okay. The health and well-being budget, you can see, is estimated at a whopping number, right? And this is a rise by 137%, if you can see, right? So this is, in policy making, it becomes so crucial that you identify uh, where we may have slacked or lacked, and what do we need to build on, right? Simplification of tax administration, ease of compliance, and reduction of litigation, right? So this is something that everyone has been very eagerly waiting for. Personally, I was also waiting so eagerly for the income tax, the new portal that has come up. But yes, there are quite a few glitches that we have seen has come up, and of course they are being taken care of. But reducing all sorts of interim and intermediary work which unnecessarily takes up people's time and energy and does not add any value, right? All those kind of things, and tax incentives to startups. That is something that, of course, it has been there earlier as well, but this time the budgeted amount was higher, particularly, when the government realized that, given that we have been on and off going into lockdown and then coming out of it and so on, it was crucial that we kind of pull up the localized, organizations and the companies which can cater to local needs, right? That became very important. So then a support system for them also became crucial, right? That not necessarily that with lockdown, let's say with restrictions in physical movements, and even within a city, forget about inter-district or interstate. So even within a city, it's not that, a particular organization which was functioning perfectly well till date, it was not being able to deliver. So we saw how, if you look at all the e-commerce platforms like Amazon or Flipkart or Myntra or whatnot, at that point in time they simply very clearly said that we are delivering only essentials, correct? So of course their business also took a lot of hit, but then transferring those products from here to there again requires a lot of physical coordination, right? Which may not be possible for a particular organization to do, which functions at a national level. But if you have localized institutes and organizations which would be able to take care, which would be aware of the local demands and take care of those local problems, right? So then, invest in them so that they can solve your problem to a great extent. This here, if you see the proposals for rationalizing the customs duty provisions by revising its structure and sector-specific changes and so on. Now, all of these were directed towards ensuring that our external sector still functions well. Okay, so whatever measures would have earlier restricted, let's say, entry of products into our country, or would have restricted, production process or investment process. So all of those measures were lightened. Okay, so this was mainly to foster the trade values even during these times, right? So many a times you kind of need just a simple kind of a pat in the back from a friend to say that, you know, everything is going to be fine, right? So it was kind of acting in that way as well, that of course in action it was expected to foster and increase our you know, exports, and we should be able to earn out of it. But along with that, it's kind of, you know, being a brotherly kind of extension towards the other economies that we have been engaged with in from the trade perspective and international relations perspective. So to foster that kind of a sense of brotherhood in a way, and along with that ensure that we keep on earning from the rest of the world, and also the other countries which to a great extent, let's say, depend on us to import from them, right? So that becomes their main source of income, so we also should be able to cater to that. Now, having talked about that, now this is about the latest economic package that was declared just a week back, right? Now, I'm sure all of you have gone through the highlights, you know, what our finance minister had to say. So, see, all of these things, whatever was decided and put across, was directed again towards how we can enable people to earn and how we can kind of push them towards spending a part of that earning, right? And that demand generation is then going to provide incentive to producers and so on. So you can see here how the credit guarantee scheme was to facilitate loans to 25 lakh borrowers under the microfinance institution. So then we already, I hope we understand how crucial and important microfinance has been particularly in a country like ours, right? So extending these kind of scheme facility, of course, would put more money in hands of people and they would be able to utilize it. And money makes more money, right? And that kind of then keeps the economy going. The interest rate was capped at 8.25% per annum, right? So this was to ensure that it does not, you know, go up, and there is incentive for capitalists and investors to borrow, right? Various regulatory and administrative issues on bank privatization has been thrashed out, has been proposed to be thrashed out, right? So this bank privatization is something that was declared during the budget itself, and just before the budget or during the budget, I forget exactly. So in order to make that happen, and the intention is that you kind of don't sit on NPAs and you kind of move towards a more efficient and effective structure, right? Economic way of doing things. So for that, this step, right? Under the Digital India, and you can see how an additional amount of money has been allocated for ensuring that broadband reaches each village in the country. And you being students currently during this time, you can imagine how dependent, how crazily dependent we have been on the internet and our electronic devices to ensure that learning continues, right? And this divide, whether you have access to internet, that in itself has led to a great divide in our country since the lockdown, right? So the people who do have access to this are able to learn and move ahead in life, but the ones who don't, they are simply sitting at home, right? They just don't have any way of learning in this stage, during this period. And that is going to lead to a further higher level of inequality in the days to come. And clearly we cannot afford that, not in a country like ours. So this move to kind of bridge that gap to some extent. I mean, of course, we've been hearing such wonderful stories of so many students in the village where they would walk to the peak of a hill and sit there because that is the only place where the network is there. But that doesn't have to be the case, right? So we definitely have to move towards a scenario where students can be in the comforts of their home and still be able to access the internet. Right? So that is what is intended here. Right? Export insurance is something that has been increased in these current proposals, and this comes as a very, very positive boost in a way. That there have been so much speculation and so much volatility in the demand that is getting generated from the rest of the world as well. So there is no way that our producers have been able to foresee or anticipate, how much to produce and at what time should we produce this. So that miscalculation has led to a lot of, let's say, production in excess. Okay, and these could be primary products which has a particular shelf life, a low shelf life. So then if it goes bad, you simply lose out on the money, and there's no one who's buying that, right? So those kind of insurances are ideally one might argue that we should have had all of these things in place long time back, but at least now it has been established and it is increasing, right? So that is something that is fantastic. The second point, see how a boost for exports through NEIA, which is the National Export Insurance Account, right? So again, here, these kind of extensions and supports are essentially telling the producer class of the economy that, we are there to have your back. Yes, of course, you need to anticipate what kind of production you need to do and the kind of cost that you will incur, but we will take care of the cost to an extent that is feasible here. And the Atmanirbhar Bharat Rozgar Yojana again has seen an increase in the amount of money that has been allotted here, and particularly this, we were talking about this a little while back as well, that whatever contribution of EPFO, this will continue till March 31st of 2022. So again here, then the employees as well as the employers will have more liquid money in hand to spend. Now I'm going to move into talking about the monetary policy. Okay. Now, so the basic instruments of the monetary policy are, things like the CRR, the SLR, the repo rate, the bank rate. Okay. Now here I am assuming that you are aware of these instruments and exactly how they work, what they stand for, right? But if there's someone who isn't very clear about this, let me just take a minute to say this. Now, the commercial banks that we see, the commercial bank system that we see in the economy, the central bank is kind of ensuring that they function in a proper way, right? Now, commercial banks, one of the things that they are attributed with is, over-the-counter transaction, right? That I keep money in a bank and I should be able to, I am able to withdraw it, depending on, of course, the kind of deposit that I'm using, the non-time deposits. Now, with these kind of deposits, then what happens is there's something that is known as credit creation, right? So the commercial banks are specifically characterized to create credit. Okay, and the way they do this is that when consumers of the economy, we deposit money with banks. The bank, of course, as per the regulations of the central bank, has to maintain a particular portion of those deposits in liquid form. right? Because it also offers over-the-counter transactions. So you and I can walk up to a bank and want to withdraw the entire amount of money that I've kept with it, and the bank can't tell me that, sorry, we don't have the money. So they have to maintain a particular percentage of the deposits, and the rest they can loan out, right? So that is so once that loan goes out, then they are earning an interest from that loan, and then a part of that interest is what is coming back to us as the depositors, again in the form of interest, right? So this interest rate spread then keeps on fluctuating, moves up and down, and that is why, again, bank privatization. That see, if there isn't a competitive market when it comes to the banking system, then the banks would be inclined towards charging a much higher interest rate when they are giving a loan out, but giving out a much lower interest rate to the depositors, right? So that they can maximize the interest rate spread through which the banks are earning their income or their profit, right? So in order to keep that also in a comfortable level, it becomes crucial that we do have a competitive market here, and that competitive market mostly would come out of more and more privatization, and that is why the government has been trying to privatize more and more banks in the last few years that we have seen. So now, keeping this in mind, that this is how it works. So you can imagine that if these the rates, the different rates that are dictated by the central bank to the commercial banks, if they are adjusted in different ways, then that will either curtail the bank's ability to loan out money, or it will actually enable the bank to loan out more money. Okay, so now here what we generally get to see, when you open the newspaper also, whenever people are talking about monetary policy, talking about the repo rate. Okay, now that is like, the CRR and SLR is to be definitely maintained with the commercial bank, and then if a time comes when, let's say, a lot of depositors are asking for their money back from a commercial bank, but they simply don't have that amount of money, so they can borrow from the central bank. Okay, so that borrowing rate is what is the repo rate. So now if this rate is diminished, right, which means that now it will be cheaper for the commercial banks to borrow from the central bank. So that means there is more incentive for the commercial banks to borrow more. So if that is the case, then they don't necessarily need to hold as much deposit as they would have otherwise. So they will loan out as much as they can, right? Which money, like loaning out in the sense, that is the money which is being borrowed by the investors, and that is what is going to enter the economy and will enable, like, capital formation, and that would help in the production process of the economy and so on, right? So here, if you see, like in the very early days of lockdown, RBI had cut its repo rate, okay? And the intention was this, that the commercial banks should be able to loan out the deposited money at a lower rate of interest for borrowing, right? So to enable borrowers, to incentivize borrowers to borrow more through the commercial banks, right? But so the desirable effect was this, but there was not sufficient demand for these funds. Okay, so then what you see in the second point that I have mentioned, that what one needs to remember is that a market structure functions with two forces simultaneously, the demand and the supply. And what failed to appear here were the borrowers, right? So the investors, there was a lot of skepticism in the market at that time. So even though the borrowing rates were very lucrative, but people simply did not want to borrow. Right. Then what happened was RBI's reverse repo account flooded in with the money that the commercial banks could not loan out, And see, that amount rose so much, like from 3 lakh crore on March 27th to 8.4 lakh crore by the end of April 2020. So basically, the monetary policy did try to give out more money, to lend so that people can borrow more money, but the times were such that the investor sentiment was just not there. So it was more of a consumer centric sentiment that was working, and we were simply not being able to tap that. Right now, the Monetary Policy Committee, like in the latest quarter, like they have met definitely more frequently than they would have done in any other year, because every time they would need to decide about how different targets should move. And since 2016-17 we have moved towards an inflation targeting structure, which we did not have earlier. So then that target also has to be maintained very, very strictly, right? But what we realized was this, that the Monetary Policy Committee decided to allow the inflation spike to remain. Right now, see, why would any monetary policy ever want to do that? If you think, like just from the top of it, it seems like a very bizarre and irrelevant kind of a decision. But if you think of it this way, that um, we have been trying as an economy to give out loans, enabling borrowers, that making it easier for them to borrow, but still they are not borrowing. Correct. So that means indirectly that is affecting the production process, right? So there is no incentive for people to borrow, because they don't see the production happening. And even though they see the production happening, they don't see that production being sold. Okay. Now, with rising prices, what happens? That gives a different path for the producers to get an incentive towards production. So even though, let's say, demand is lesser in number, so the number of people may be lesser who are demanding, but because the prices are higher, there is a possibility that they would be able to earn more. Okay, I can see that my time is coming very close, so I'll just quickly move through this, and I'll try to wrap up within the next 5 minutes. Yeah. So you see here how the monetary policy, they decided to continue with the accommodative stance, because the main focus was to revive growth. Okay, so they're not currently not focusing on bringing the inflation level down, but actually they're like, let it be, because that at least is going to provide some incentive to the producers, and we need that desperately right now. Two main things that I need to speak about after this are the crude oil prices and the exchange rate. Okay, so we have seen how the crude oil prices have like shot up, with the production in the OPEC and the non-OPEC allies having gone down. So that has naturally created an excess demand in the market, which has pushed its prices up, and that naturally then gets reflected across the economy everywhere. Right. These are some of the data points that you can take home, how the crude oil prices have fluctuated and where they are expected to be this year. Similarly, if you look at the exchange rate, mostly it has hovered around 72 to 75 INR per dollar, the nominal exchange rate, of course. Again, the exchange rate has a very, very, very severe impact on anything and everything that happens across the borders and the physical boundaries of the country, because everything that we buy or sell in the world market, that gets translated based on this exchange rate. Right. So if there is an appreciation of our currency, of the Indian currency, which means that this number would go down, the nominal exchange rate would go down, which means we need to pay lesser of our domestic currency for the foreign currency, which is the US dollar here. So if that is the case, then we would be able to buy more with the same amount of our domestic currency. Right. So that kind of interaction in the world market is very important, and it's very important to keep it as stable as possible, so that the buyers and the sellers in the world market also have some semblance about how to work around it. So how much do we need to export and how much do we need to import? This decision depends on what is the price in the international market of the various products, and that price is directly dictated by the kind of exchange rate, the value of the exchange rate that we have. Right? So now I have just a few graphs that I put together because I thought the visual explanation would be easier to understand. So these are data from RBI. So here you can see the various monetary policy rates and how, like, interestingly, what I want you to note is this. So see, this is April 20, then this is October 20, and this is June 21. So this April 20, right, which is April of 2020, you can see how this dip has happened for, I mean, overall, of course, you can see how SLR has come down. But you can particularly see for all the other rates, how this dip has happened over this time, between October 19 and April 20. Right, and then these dips have been maintained till now. Right, and this is all to ensure that there is more money in hand, the more money in circulation, and the volatility of money being exchanged is higher, and so on. This is how the nominal exchange rate has looked like since last year. So here again, you can see how, of course, exchange rate is one of the most volatile variables that we ever come across in macroeconomics. But despite that, see, this is from January 2020 till June 2021, right? But so despite the volatility, in a way, you can see kind of a positive trend. But in the recent times, again, here, if you see between April and June, we have seen the rupee appreciating, and that is one of the reasons why we expect the rupee to be doing well. These are the weekly deposits that the RBI website hosts for all the commercial banks taken together. So you can see on an average how it has gone up. So this is something that is promising, right? But at the same time, this rise in the deposits is not something that we should be very happy about, because people depositing more money, it should not mean that people are not spending and they are saving. That's why the deposits are going up, right? So this requires a little more of analysis to be done. Maybe if the data is there with us, we should be able to say then, whether this is affecting the purchasing power of the people. And these are our foreign exchange reserves. So you can see how it has gone up steadily. Of course, main reason is because we haven't been able to import as much as we used to because of closing down of most of the things around the world, right? So that has kind of, in a positive way, impacted the economy such that we have been able to build on our foreign exchange reserves. Okay. That is it from my end today, and yes, I'm 4 minutes over the time. I'm really sorry, but I hope we should be able to take a few questions.
Ishita ma'am, that was really an amazing talk. In 1 hour, you have given us so much of information that I really don't know where to start asking you questions from. My question to Amina ma'am, I just want some general information. This situation is so unpredictable, and we are taking these measures, as and how these things are changing. What do we need to create some flexible kind of systems in our policies now, like which can adapt to the, uh, as and when the changes take place? Is that possible also? I mean,
Right,
it's
right,
a wild
ma'am.
question. Is it possible also to make such
Yeah.
changes?
Supriya ma'am, you have hit on the nail, definitely, but I mean, that is what would ideally be the perfect way of working the issues in the current scenario that we are facing. But unfortunately, that kind of a framework is very difficult to
Yeah.
put together. Definitely not at the central level. So, you would see there are so many arguments where people have come across and said that probably the ULBs, which is the urban local bodies, and the kind of local bodies that we have in the rural parts of the country as well, how we should kind of bring them into this process. And for so many years now, we have been actually looking at enabling these bodies so that they can take a bunch of decisions at their end, and because they are the ones who are seeing the local issues and the local problems, and if it does not get addressed, let's say within a period in time, it simply keeps on piling up, and then trying to resolve it from a centralized force, it's kind of an impossible task, absolutely. So then um, I mean, at the central level, it's. I don't see how a common framework can be worked out where all these dynamic things could be featured in. But honestly, I believe that if we can, to some extent, at least decentralize this process and give money and funds in the hands of these bodies, and then give them you know decision making powers so that they can do the work at their level. So maybe that's one way in which we can go ahead.
Right, right, right. Thank you so much. I think I should let students ask more questions.
Sure, ma'am.
Yes. Anybody for questions? Yes, dear students. You have any questions to ask her? You can ask as simple as it is.
No, ma'am, it's all good.
I
It's all
think I have bombarded with too many things within such a short period of time.
Zada Sriram has got a question. Yes, Zada. Sriram, go ahead. Yes.
Ma'am, if this corona situation still for prolong for say आणखी 4 to 5 years, then how can government will uh, make rescue policies for this situation?
Right. So, see, there is no foreseeing that. There is no forecasting that. So, and that's why, in a way, the policies are also moving like one day at a time. If you see that, I mean, of course, that's not the optimal way of doing things, but we simply can't help it. Now, given that if we are to say that let's say for the next 4 5 years we have to function like this, then the major thing that needs to be the change that needs to be brought about probably from the policy perspective is how our country functions and how we work, the kind of work that is done where, let's say, you have to be physically present. So if you think about the factories and the construction workers, right? So there is no question of doing a remote kind of work in these kind of industries. So there again, then let's say the government should then the policies should then focus towards how can we still safely go back to working in these industries, right? That let's say the vaccination drive that has been ongoing. Um, we are still so many steps behind even understanding the total number of people that we have in our country. Aadhaar card was one of the ways in which it was envisioned that people would be brought under that tracker, but we haven't still been able to do that, right? So we still don't know how many people have been vaccinated, how many people are left, how many people are safe to go back to work, and so on. So the first thing I think is that we need to uh, bring in policies which should be able to target that. That we, of course, digitize India so that the kind of jobs where you can work remotely that can continue without any hindrance, and your production happens, your earning happens, and everything is hunky-dory. But in the industries where physical presence of employees and inputs are required, we need to ensure that all sorts of measures are being taken. Let's say vaccination is done. There is proper distance maintaining, for example, the social distancing that we have been maintaining. So that needs to be very, very closely followed and implemented. And of course, if people say indeed fall sick while working because of the lack of these measures, then there has to be a support system from the medical point of view, right? So a person cannot going to work safely if at the back of his mind he knows that if I fall sick, I will have to bear the entire expenditure, right? So if the policies can be directed towards that one thing is that the measures that they need to take, measures the industries also need to take to ensure that the employees are safe when they're coming to work. And secondly, if at all things still go bad, then at least there is a support from the medical point of view, so that people can come back to work without any fear, right? So that is one of the main things I believe that we will have to look at if we believe that this is how it is going to be for the next 4-5 years.
I want to ask you a very simple question, yet kind of a complicated one. Is that you said that of course physical policies are basically for those. I mean, for the downtrodden. We want to bring them, and monetary policy helps that. And no country, obviously, country is going to plan about it and come out with its own. I mean, the policies which are absolutely going to cater to the needs. Then, in spite of that, why do we still fail in getting the right thing at the implementation stage?
Right. So what we need to understand, ma'am, here is when we are talking about fiscal policy and monetary policy, we are talking about it from an economic perspective, where we are saying that optimally this is how it should happen and this is how it should work. But what we when we, let's say, initial days when the students are taught about fiscal and monetary policy, what is not taught to them probably is how the political scenario of the economy also comes in very strongly when it comes to policy making, right? So there again, having said that, also you will have to, like, if you put yourself in the shoes of the policymaker from the, let's say, fiscal policy point of view. Now you will need to be, let's say, in power. You will need to be the government in order to implement certain policies and then ensure that they work out, right? So let's say a 5-year term of any prime minister, correct? So then as that person or as that group of people, let's say, who's running the government, we need to ensure that, okay, we stay in power for the next 5 years as well, so that whatever we implement now will actually reap its benefits later as well. And we would be around to then say that, okay, we did that, and it was our policies because of which this happened, and so please vote us again, right? Now, if you think of it then from a practical point of view, where again there's a lot of indecision, that every political party would be unsure whether they would be re-elected for the next 5 years or not. So then the intention, more or less, more often than not, what happens is that I am going to focus on what can be done in these 5 years. Okay, so I'm going to ignore, let's say, the things that I can do now, which will reap its benefits and show its benefits, let's say, in the next 10 years or 12 years, right? Because that is not in my immediate interest. So in a way, you end up looking more at the short run and the medium run rather than looking at the longer run. And ideally, in a typical, from just an economic perspective, a policy making, an effective policy making should target all these three things, like, the short run, the medium run, and the long run as well. But so many times we kind of end up looking at that firefighting situation कि अच्छा आज कैसे जी सकते हैं उतना देख लो कल का कल देखेंगे kind of a scenario. And that is where that is one thing. The second thing, which of course holds true for many other countries, not just ours but definitely ours as well, which is the implementation. If you look at our policies, I mean, if you go through the kind of policies that our country has brought in, let's say since the independence, for that matter, the policies are fantastic on paper, but the trouble is, does it actually trickle down to the people who for whom it is meant to benefit, right? तो वहां तक पहुंचते पहुंचते पैसा खत्म हो जाता है, किसी को पता नहीं किधर जाता है. So that way, that is again one of the policy failures that we would see, right? कि आपके खाते में इतना पैसा आ जाएगा and so on. But how many people in the country have been able to get benefited due to that? And there could be various reasons for that.
Yeah, I know. Recently there was a news also. The number of Swiss bank account holders are Indians.
Absolutely, yes. Yes.
And other two things which are, is there anything called as an ideal fiscal and monetary policy?
Not really, ma'am. It's kind of we are always balancing. It's like a seesaw, and so if you see broadly, the fiscal policy is directed towards, let's say, growth of an economy, like in a very simplistic term, if I say that the growth of the economy should grow. That is, let's say, the main purpose of a fiscal policy. And for the monetary policy, it is keeping inflation under control. Now, if you see the relation between price and output, they share a positive relation. Right? So only if prices rise, then the producers will have the incentive to produce more, and only then the economy would grow.
Yes.
So then, in order for a higher growth rate, ideally the economy would need higher price levels. But the moment we have higher price levels, if you look at the consumer side, and particularly if you look at the poor people in the country, right, they are the ones who get adversely affected. So that's why, and of course, see, if we were able to raise the income of the entire population of the economy at par, then if you think of it for a second, inflation will never be considered as a problem. Inflation would never be an economic issue, right? Because agar mera income bhi equally बढ़ रहा है, so then why would I care about prices rising, na? Because I am being able to afford it anyway. Now the issue is कि वो नहीं हो पाता है, that we are not being able to raise income of the people, but prices are rising, and that's why we need to keep inflation under control. So then, when you look at these two perspectives, that the job of the fiscal policy is to keep the economy growing, but the job of the monetary policy is to control the inflation. So these two kind of act against each other. Right? And that's why we, like, if one goes up, the other has to go down, and vice versa. And that's why there is no one particular remedy that we can say. It always has to be a mix and match. And even though, let's say, there was a point in time, when students were taught that these two policies are independent of each other. I mean, of course, they are independently decided. But at the same time, over the years, economists have come to realize that we cannot work in silos when it comes to these two policies. Because let's say a fiscal policy is targeting something and the monetary policy is doing something that is countering that. So then it's not in the benefit of anybody in the economy. So somewhere down the line, there has to be some discussion, okay, some conversations between the two types of policy makers, and decide how to go ahead with it. So that point that I was making, that the monetary policy committee has decided to allow the inflation to be high and not target to bring it down, because it is kind of, the monetary policy is kind of supporting the fiscal policy in saying that, all right, I mean, at this point in time, it's more important that we get the economy running, that the economy grows, the production happens. For that, if we have to deal with a higher level of average prices, let's do that for a while. And once again, everything is comparatively under control. Maybe we can do something to pull the reins on inflation that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree. Ma'am, one more. Your comment on India as a market.
India as a market. Now that would again have a lot of layers in the sense. So we are in a way a market for investment. We are a market where we provide, let's say, inputs like in human capital resources. And also we are a market where people can sell their final products and services, of course. Now, in all of these respects, see, currently, ek to the kind of outsourcing that India has been involved with, that I believe is still possible with the even when physical movement has been restricted. When it comes to investments, yes, that has taken a hit, but it is bound to grow as the economy grows, right? Because the prospect of the country has been really great, of the economy has been really great. So we will find investors, just like we have found in the past as well, I believe. But the skepticism, if you ask me, for my in my head, is mostly about the market when you talk about we importing from the rest of the world. So other economies selling their products to us. That I think will take a much longer time to get back on track, simply because right now people are so concerned about, like, just their essential life and consumption that will just make them move from one day to the other. Simply the level of income that people had earlier, that has taken a toll, and that would definitely have an impact on the kind of imports that we are able to have. So I believe we would not be able to go back to that level of import in quite some time now. And that is the only market I believe that would get hit for the longest of the time.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. Thank you for answering patiently. Anybody who has got questions to ask her? Then we'll end the session. Yes? Any of you? Yes, ma'am.
Ishita ma'am, that was really wonderful. Thank you so much. Shamla ma'am, I think I learned a lot today in this 1 hour session. And next time, maybe we should have it a little longer than 1 hour. So we have more details we can talk about.
And she took it from a very simple background of explaining what is fiscal policy, monetary policy, and then she talked about the effects it had on COVID and how the economy has turned. Right justice to the title. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you for being here. And thank you for
Thank you
sharing
so
your,
much, Supriya ma'am. I know we haven't met. I wish we could have, done this physically, face to face. But it was a pleasure meeting you and interacting with you and your students today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. So we call it off now. Yeah, should we end it?
Send the meeting.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah. So I end the meeting here. Let me just download the attendance before I end.